Welcome to another episode of Grief in the Raw. My name is Kelli Holloway, and I am your host, and I'm so excited for you to join in on the conversation that we are having today with my very special guest, Miss Lucretia Greaux. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
And when we say here, we want to let the listeners know, if you're viewing, you can already see, but we are actually live on location at Lit Java Coffee and Books here in Houston, Texas. And what a blessing it is that they have opened up the doors for us to have this wonderful conversation. This is my first in-person conversation for the podcast, so there's a lot of firsts here. And how awesome is it that I get to talk with Lucretia in this beautiful Black-owned, women-owned facility, sipping amazing coffee. Cheers to us, to this moment. And I'm in awe. So if I pause several times throughout this, know that I'm just like getting it together. We have the tissues, we have our notes. We're going to have a really good time. Yes. And I'm just thankful for it all. So welcome to this episode. Lucretia, before I give your full introduction, I have to let the listeners know we have had quite the weekend.
We have. But it's been awesome.
It's been awesome. Lucretia is visiting from Knightdale, North Carolina. You'll hear that in her introduction. But before we get there, and I'm also going to see about sharing some photos with you all when you view it on YouTube. She came and surprised my two girls, y'all. They had, Ava had her first soccer game where Mike is actually her coach. So we got to see Minnie first, and then who walks on the field? None other than Miss Lucretia from North Carolina here in Houston, Texas, to raise up my children, praise them, give them all of the good endorphins so that they can go out on that field and win.
Yes.
It was just a beautiful time, and I just thank you for it. So I'm going to introduce you, but then we're going to go back to that moment for a second. But y'all, without any further ado, let me introduce you to and welcome to the stage Miss Lucretia. She is a practitioner in mental health, social, educational, and community work. She is responsible for a full range of analysis, training, and consulting activities with over 20 years of experience. She's a graduate of the University of Southern California and Fayetteville State University, FSU, stand up. She also has a master's in social work. She is part owner of a private practice, Renewed Strength Counseling Services in Knightdale, North Carolina, working at the intersection of social work and education. She specializes in cultivating and supporting community partners between mental health, school, community agencies, parents, families, and students. And y'all, she does it really, really well. She has been an extremely dedicated practitioner, both as a school social worker and licensed clinical social worker. Lucretia is a wife of 28 years to Jimmy and the mother of 2 adult daughters. And I want you to pronounce their names for me.
Shatomi and Makeda.
Oh, I love it. I love it. She also has a bonus daughter, Mercedes, and twin 7-month-old grandkids, London and Cameron. And she has 2 miniature Yorkies.
Yes.
So the house is full of love.
It's full of
That's
love.
That's what I'm hearing. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I want to know your thoughts when you walked on that field and you saw Zoe and Ava after almost a year of not seeing them in person. How did it feel that moment?
It was a precious moment for me to see them thriving and doing so well and being so happy, knowing their experience of their loss. And I was excited. I was excited to see the whole family and just excited to see how you and Mike are doing with allowing them to have their voices, but also checking in with them to have their emotions, and you're cultivating and building them even through that. So it was just precious, and my heart was just a beating. So especially when Zoe looks up and she's looking and she realizes, oh, I know that lady.
Yeah.
So it was awesome.
And when I tell you what a joy it is when, as a parent, you have folks, family or not, right, blood or not, that take up time with your children, that invest in your children in the right way, positively, but then actually show up in that moment, not even just, not saying, okay, I'm going to call them, which you have done. Okay, I'm going to duo and video chat, which you have done, but actually in person come to visit us. What that meant for Mike and I will never forget that moment. And I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for it. So part of what we do at the beginning of the show, today we are discussing walking children and nurturing children through their own grief journey. So it's a heavy topic. I want to check in with listeners and with viewers, but I also want to know from you, Lucretia, how are you today on your grief scale? And for those that don't know what the grief scale is, to kind of level set and begin our discussion always, we check in with each other to see how are we feeling. A 10 on the grief scale means I'm really heavy with my grief today. I can barely move. I can't get out of bed. It's the only thing that's on my mind. Versus a 1 would be I'm light as a feather. Grief is not affecting me at all today. So I'd love to know from you your grief scale number today.
So my grief scale number today is a 1. I feel very light. It's just, like I said, I'm full.
Yeah.
With just having this opportunity to be able to be here, and in the moment not having to, carry that grief. I think when I think about all my loved ones, my father-in-law, he would be probably most excited that I just did something that was out of the box.
Yeah.
So I feel light.
Yeah. I am at a 1 today because I also feel very full. And sometimes when you're in the midst of grief, it's hard to think about stepping on the outside of that and being anywhere other than surrounded by grief and surrounded by the pain and loss that you feel. It's always there, right? Yes. However, today and yesterday, spending time with you and the girls and just seeing how far we've come in our grief journey, that's why I feel lighter today, because I'm like, wow, it really does show the healing and the practices that we instituted almost 2 years ago today are still standing firm. And so because of that, I'm at a 1. And my prayer for everyone listening, for anyone that's holding their children's hand through grief, for the late nights of crying, staying up late, worrying about your child's tummy because it's hurting, or how are they doing at school because folks aren't identifying with the pain that they feel. All of that is valid, and over time, instituting the right resources is going to make that pain lighter, and that grief number is going to go down, not just for you, but for your child as well.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. My first question for you. Before we delve into today's topic, supporting children in their grief walk, I'd love for our listeners and viewers to learn more about what led you to this very important work.
Okay. So just coming into the work of becoming a therapist or a clinical licensed social worker, just growing up, I grew up on a farm, and having loving grandparents, a loving big family, and having grandparents who always instilled in me that in some way that I was my neighbor's keeper. I was the community's keeper. I was my brother and sister keeper. And what that meant is that we were by no means rich, but we were fortunate growing up on a farm. And there were people around us where they taught us is that sometimes it was okay to show up for someone else, and how that go a long way. And so coming into this work, I always knew I wanted to be a social worker. And I ended up working in the field of DSS, working in the field of working with adolescent mothers and delinquent juveniles. And in that process, I also kind of was like, I want to be in the school system because I wanted to be able to tap into youth and working with children before they became an adult, right? Because what we know that, if we can sit with a child and check in with them where they are, children are a lot easier to repair than adults.
Right.
And we know that trauma most of the time starts in our childhood, not just as an adult. So I got into this work because I wanted to make a difference. I love working with our people of color. I work with across the board with everyone, but my passion is being able to pour back into our my own, and that is our Black and brown families, and getting them to see that they don't have to deny themselves of their own emotions. We just need to tap into and understand what we have going on so that they can show up in the world different,
Right.
in a better space.
And y'all will forgive me, hopefully. I've had this bronchitis cough for like a month, so I will be coughing some. I want to go back to 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. I lost my mother on October 3rd of 2022. And after her departure, I was left with the feeling of a motherless child, but also the feeling of a mother that doesn't know what to do with her own children's grief. And that intersection was really daunting to me. Of course, a new place that I had never been before, having to make space for my own grief, but also walk my children through. And so my oldest at the time, well, she's still my oldest, of course. She was just turning 4?
Yes.
My youngest had just turned 2. And between both of them, they were having this experience that I knew nothing of because I had not lost my grandmother as early as they lost one of their grandmothers.
Yes.
So I didn't know what to do with their pain. I immediately started to reach out because y'all know me, I'm going to find the resources, right? I started first with EAP, that's the Employee Provided Assistance Programs.
Yes.
And I was told at every turn, oh, your children are too young. We won't be able to see them. It won't be able to be covered. They'll be fine, was what they told me. Meanwhile, my children would not go to sleep without having one of Nana's shirts or dresses or something close by. They needed to feel her. They needed to see her. They would wake up with sweats and nightmares because where is Nana? I want Nana, right? It was hard for me as well because anytime they would mention my mom, be it a happy mention or a sad mention, I was triggered. And so I wanted to know, Lord, how do I continue to heal in my own right, but also handhold my children with it? There was some instances where it felt like I was walking over hot coals on behalf of them. I'd be holding them. Then we'd get past the hot coals. I'd put them down. My feet would be burning. That's the literal feeling of anytime they would mention my mom, it was like a gut punch to me. So reaching out, trying to find the right resources, everyone was telling me, they're too young. They will get over it in their own time. And so I was kind of left with this answer of, let's package it up. Let's put it in the briefcase, the suitcase, and they'll take it out when they're older, and then we can work through it then. I'm sorry, but that answer was not good enough for me. So I continued to reach out. It took me about a month to find you. And someone said, why don't you try Renewed Strength? They actually work with kids. I don't know their age range, but just start with an email. So I emailed you, and I loved when I went to your website, I saw these beautiful brown faces, and I was like, this is a safe space. Surely, if they won't see us, they'll tell us where to go. And you immediately said, bring them in. Let me sit with you and with them, and we'll figure it all out. And I will never forget our first meeting. Lucretia sat on the floor with my kids and played Play-Doh, blocks, coloring, and just talked about my mom in a way that I had never heard anybody talk about her before that was in terms that they as kids could understand. And I left that meeting, that session, and I cried and cried and cried, happy tears. And I said, Mom, I found someone that's going to help me help Zoe and Ava. So thank you for that. Thank you. So with that, I want to ask you, how can families recognize if a child is struggling with loss and grief?
So one of the things, especially as I am navigating in the world of play therapy, is that what we know is children don't always have words.
Right.
Their language sometimes is seen in just behaviors. And so the youngest child that I have worked with has been 3 years old. Giving her the place, safe place, to just be able to say what she feels or ask the questions, I think is so important. So what we have to do is sometimes we have children who, like I said, your girls are very bright, and they have some language. They are able to verbalize a need, or desire, or even a feeling. And a lot of times what I've learned is, especially in the Black community, we forget that children are beings. Mm-hmm. They are human beings, and they feel just like adults do, right? So for me, what's important is when I see a behavior, I don't necessarily identify that behavior as a negative, bad, reactive behavior. I look at that behavior and I want to know, okay, so what's happening with them right now, right? And so I think we have to take the time that when children are showing this display of maladaptive behavior that we don't necessarily want, we don't always have to shut it down. What we need to do is we need to yield ourselves, to be able to just pause and just go and stand with them and do what I call co-regulate. Co-regulate means I'm not shutting down a behavior, but I'm going over and I'm going to be my calm self, my tone of voice. All of those things are going to matter in me helping this child to just kind of regulate themselves. And then once they regulate, we can then sit down and talk about, well, what are we feeling? Mm-hmm. And sometimes for me, I don't start with children, because not all children have the language for what their emotions are. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I'll just say, can you tell me what you feel in your body? Our bodies always tell us what's happening before probably something pops up. And so that sensation is where I start with children is, do you feel sweaty palms? What do you feel? When you're crying, do your cheeks feel warm? Do your body feels warm? So we start with the language of children, and sometimes, like I said, it's not always a lot of words, but they can tell me that their tummy hurts, or they can tell me that they have a butterfly in their stomach, and so we just start there. Mm-hmm. With being able to just see.
Wow. So how does a child say when they don't have a language? Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that parents or guardians can look out for that might give them this flag of, I need help with this. I need to examine this a little bit more. Mm-hmm. What are some of the warning signs?
So some of those warning signs could be a child the parent may perceive as having a temper tantrum, falling out in the middle of the floor. What is that temper tantrum? Some of it could be yelling. Some of that actually could be children have the ability, even though they may not have a whole lot of language to tell you exactly what's happening to them, they do have the language to tell you, I hate you. Mm-hmm. They do have the language to say some of the things that could be hurtful to you as a parent, even though they may not necessarily understand exactly what they're saying. And so we're looking at that, the behaviors. Even we have children who just shut down and stop talking, children who isolate. That's a big one. I stopped hanging out with mommy. I stopped playing with the sisters and brothers, and I just want to be by myself. And sometimes that's perceived as being mean towards a sibling, not wanting to share, not wanting to be around them. So all of those things, especially in the light of a loss of a loved one that has always been there. And when you see your child who's been juvenile and happy, and now all of a sudden they're just crying and they're tearful, those are those signs. And one of the things that we have to be mindful of too is a kid, because unlike parent or like adults, we don't have that ability to regulate. So a 3-year-old could be happy, playing, jumping, and carrying on one moment, and then see something or hear something and they're not okay the next moment, right? And a lot of times parents will look, well, you were just fine a while ago. Well, okay, well, let's tap into, well, what just changed for that child,
Right.
right? And so just like our kids get triggered too by those little things that happen.
Yeah. When you said that, it reminds me of, and this doesn't happen as much anymore, but in the very beginning, almost right after mom passed, for probably a good 6 months to a year, whenever my children would get super sleepy and it was time to go to bed, but they didn't want to go to bed, they would start tantruming and going on. And then at the height of the tantrum, they'd start saying, I want my Nana.
Yeah.
And it was like this deep, like rooted, I have to have her now. And that would send this voltage through my body because I'm like, well, dang, I want her too, you know? And so then I would have to call on Mike to kind of step in those moments. And I would always question, why is it at the height of their upsetness? And to me, it was transferring as, she's the only one that could heal me right now. She's what I really, really want. I'm already upset, and now I'm upset and I don't have her. Makes it even worse. And so those are some of the ways that it was, to me, you know, how they talk about the different stages of grief, that anger is there. That was their anger coming out. They were upset about not being able to sleep, but they were also upset because they didn't have their Nana. And so those are some of the places where I almost call it like coming to the edge of the cliff. I didn't know what else to do at those moments when it felt like their feelings were so big. How do we begin to peel back the layers of that onion?
But and that's just it, right? So you're talking about routine, right? They had a routine, and children that young, they don't understand why that routine changed. Why? So that's why it's so important that we have the conversations with children, and so things that I've learned through just my grief training, and through just doing the play therapy is, it is so important that we talk with children on their level, but using the correct terminology. Sometimes we make these, statements of, well, she's sleep or she's transition. Well, children don't always make that connection. And there's always this little thing in their head that, okay, well, I'm still waiting for them to come back.
Right.
And so at some point in time, the important piece is to use the correct language, death and died or dying, because children eventually, at some point in time, somewhere between the age of 8 or 6, we say 6, between 6 and 8, they can start understanding that this means this is permanent. This means that my whole life has to change. There is this transition, and Nana won't come back. And so now we start trying to help them by what I call strengthening and building their memory of who Nana was. So Nana, we can always still have pieces of Nana, because we can always go back in and pull up our memory of Nana. And Nana memory can create the calm space, right? And so it's so important that we give children the space to be able to have those memories, and things like that. But it's so important as well to understand, just like adults, when our routine is kind of sent off the track, it makes us feel some kind of way, and our children will experience that same thing. So yeah.
When we talk about grief in children, two questions come to mind. That grief, we're not just talking about grief associated with the loss of a physical, a death, right? There are other facets of grief. So I want you to talk about that, but I also want to talk about, when is the right time to introduce counseling or therapy to a child? So those are kind of two different questions, but in the same realm. In your thoughts on that?
So yeah, so just like adults, what I will say is that, we have those 5 stages of grief, right? And grief healing is not linear. So it's typical. I can be up and down, up and down. A lot of times for children, They may not start at what we call the denial stage. They may go right into the anger stage,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And we see these big emotions. But what I will say is that the anger stage is necessary in order for them to go into the healing parts of it, right? So it is okay that they have those emotions, and we need to validate that it is okay, that the thing that got disrupted, that the thing that's missing, that the thing that's no longer here isn't there. And I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to be here. Even when you may not want me as a substitute, I'm going to be here for you. And so I think that piece of it is important. As far as like the different types of grief, like you said, sometimes it's not just a death. One of the challenges I think for you and your babies was it wasn't just that on one minute I've gone through just getting past the fact that my Nana is not here, mom is not here, and then you had the opportunity to move to Texas,
Yeah.
right? And that was huge.
Yeah.
But that is also another big transition for a kiddo.
Yes.
And for your babies who are in school, well, guess what? The new transition is now I've just lost the friends that I had. And that's a transition of moving into another city because again, I can experience something that's really happy and joyful and still grieve something. And so moving to Texas, that's a form of grief, right? I
Yeah.
had to lose out on some things, and things that I had here, I've lost. The house that grew up in and I was so used to is no longer there. Even though you have a great house here, there's still some of those things, those memories that I'm still attached to. So children still have to go through those same forms of transitions. And I think as adults, sometimes we don't realize that children do experience those same levels of loss, friendships, moving. Pets is another big one that we see a lot when we lose pets. That those have impacts, and I think as parents we have to sit and have conversations with our kiddos. We have to talk, we have to ask them questions. How are you feeling today? Is there anything that you would like to share with me, so that they can open up and be able to do that. As far as like age range, right? Like I said, the youngest kid or child that I've worked with has been 3 years old. But at the same time, I think as long as we start with children, I always start with emotions. I always start with feelings, because I think that is the most important thing. But I do that through play. We do that through watching some videos, different faces that I'll show them. What does this look like? They could tell me someone is crying. Well, what may make a person cry, right? So we try to help them build up that vocabulary around different emotions. So now, are there some children that may not be ready? Yes, especially if you're looking for them to have language. So I've been fortunate enough, years ago, working with someone at another agency that I worked with for Hope Services, therapist, and I thought it was the coolest thing that I can go in and, hey, sit with the kid and be in their space, and we have tea parties. But those tea parties then led to them building a relationship with me and trusting me, that now they felt comfortable when they came in. And if I would ask them about one kid in particular, it was her father, and I would ask that question, like, well, how do you feel? And over time, she started to open up a little more about her father. I've worked with foster care kids. That's another big loss and transitioning, foster care kids. And so my experience with working with foster care kids is knowing I have a memory of a woman or a man, but they're not there.
And that can also be in the instance of divorce, too.
Yes, divorces is another big one. Separation, that is another big one. And blended families, having, when a parent remarries.
Right.
And then there's another sisters and brothers. So all of these things are transitions that can equate to a kid feeling some sense of loss, and they go into isolation. Some kids, when there's a divorce, may feel abandoned. And abandonment is another part of that grief process.
Heavy, heavy. But I'm encouraged because even in the role of play, even in the role of I love the question, how are you doing? You know, to me, what resonates is your presence is what matters the most. Yes. You know, it's sitting with the child, even if they've got big emotions, not masking those emotions, not telling those emotions to go away. I remember, you know, when my grandmother passed away. Now, granted, I was older when my grandma left. I was almost getting ready to be a senior in college. But even with those emotions, I was told, well, she's in a better place, you know, kind of thing. And it's like, she might be in a better place, but I'm in hell, you know.
Yes.
So like, what I'm learning about children and their grief is just as heavy, but their bodies are so small. Yes. So like if you, I'm a really big imagery person, but if you see me holding this 50-pound weight that equates to my grief, my daughters, they have that same 50-pound weights, but they're not even 50 pounds. Yes. So if I'm not learning how to process mine, how in the world can I help them with theirs? And to me, that answer was having someone who can be present with them in the moments that I couldn't, meaning I might be sitting there too, but I'm having my own grief reaction. I need the calm to come in to help them while I'm helping myself. And that's where I want us to get more comfortable about asking for help, letting specialists come in, letting someone help to counsel, because we were never meant to do it by ourselves. And that's kind of the point of all of this. So I'm so happy that you have been present, not just with my family, but so many families that walk through this. It's important.
Yeah, but I think it's also given parents the space to realize too that we don't have to rush through this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't have to rush through our grief process. We don't have to rush children through it. Children are resilient. Yeah. So they can bounce back. But I think it's important that if we lay a foundation for healthy coping strategies, given those helping coping, and that comes from what we mirror. Even the language that we use, right? I think it's important say that, you know, instead of saying, hey, you know, I'm so upset because mom is not here anymore. It is more or less, today I'm having a moment where I feel sad because I miss her.
Right.
Right. Because when we use that language, well, I'm upset because she's not here anymore. Does that send a message for the kid? Well, is she supposed to come back? Right. And we know that mom isn't coming back. But to just share, you know, just for the moment, right now, mom is feeling sad because she misses grandma. She misses Nana too. You know. Yeah. And that gives the children, I think, permission to know that it's okay from time to time if I'm missing, but it's going to be okay.
Right. And making space for that. I remember, as you say that, I'm reminded of, I remember one time we went somewhere and we were on the drive back and Zoe was like, I just miss her so much. And I said to her, I think we're going to miss her a little bit always. Yes. Until we see her again. And when we see her again, we're going to have all these stories to tell her. We're going to talk for days on end about, well, did you see us go ice skating? Did you see us do this? Did we see it? Because for us, Nana is looking out of this window in heaven and she can see what's going on. That's what we have talked through. Yeah, that's how we make sense of things. So I'll say, you know, she'll be able to say, Nana, did you see me graduate and what I was wearing? And she'll be able to say, yes, baby, I saw it all, you know? And so to me, that doesn't negate the feeling of I miss her. Yes. It is as bad as we feel. We do want her here. However, there's both and. I can be sad and I can be missing her. I can also understand that being sad is not wrong. Yes. It's okay to be sad. Okay. And we will be missing her forever. Yes. And so it was you that gave me that courage to have that language and to be able to say to my children, it's okay that we miss her. And now it has transferred into a happy, like it gets easy. I don't want to say easier. It gets lighter over time. The other day we were outside and we see Nana outside always.
Yes.
My girls pick her out of the moon and the stars.
I love it.
And so Ava looked up, we were outside at a neighborhood function. Ava looked up and said, Mom, there's Nana. And so I wasn't looking, right? So I wasn't, and we hadn't been talking about Nana. So like, of course, my heart kind of stopped like, does she see someone that looks like Mom? And she was looking up at the moon. She was looking up at the moon and she said, Mom, there's Nana. And I was like, yep, there she is, you know? And then we just had this sweet moment and it came and went like a wave.
Yeah.
And then it was like, wow, look how much we've grown and we're healing through that. Before we have a segment, a social media segment that we look at a video. And before we do that though, I want to know, what advice do you have for a parent or guardian that has to now tell a child that a loved one has passed? Like what do you say? And I know that that's a loaded question and it's also very personal, but from your expertise, where does a person begin to, now they have this information and they want to tell a child, and this could be a toddler child or it could be an older adolescent. What do they say?
I think what's important is, again, I always say, tap into you first.
Yeah.
Right? Because children, whether we acknowledge it or not, they have the ability to pull from our own energy. And so it's important that even though we are going through it, is give ourselves permission to just sit in the moment and do some deep breathing and just process what we feel.
Right.
And then depending on the age, depending on the relationship, because one thing I haven't said is sometimes not all losses are losses from something that's positive, right? Some children experience a loss of a caregiver or a significant other, but that person hasn't been very kind. And so what that looks like is that relationship could have been abusive, inappropriate disciplines, or even just the language of how we talk with our kids. And so I work with a lot of children who are going through that part of the grief.
That's real.
It's traumatic.
Yeah.
But it's still lost all the same. And so understanding where that child is, but being able to, like I said, I think the most important thing is using the correct language, even down to explaining what a funeral is and the why behind why the funeral. This is closure, right? For most of the time for families and adults. And so a lot of times parents are tasked, allow my 5-year-old or my 7-year-old to come to the funeral because I feel that they're going to be having nightmares or they're going to be having these different things. So I think it's important to also check in with the child, because children closure, just like adults need closure, sometimes children being able to go through that experience if they can, it helps. But also it allowed them to still be with the family, right? So I'm here with my family. My family is sad. My family is crying. And children can still be a part of that process. And I think for some kids that is still helpful. So I do think whatever we are doing, we have to use the correct language as to what is happening, because children need to be able to distinguish that as they're going through the process and as they get older, that death is permanent, that it won't change. The person will never be coming back. But as you're going through that, you also have to initiate then, well, let's talk about some of those things that this loved one has done for us.
Right.
Let's be okay with, I have some parents who's like, well, I don't know if I want to talk about it because I don't want to make them sad. What I can tell you is that when there are positive memories, is let's talk about those fun times.
Yeah.
And have kids give their input on, well, what do you remember most about Nana or about whoever that loved one is? Because children have their own stories. And one of the things I always say that we've experienced through our 5 senses is it is always in part into us. And so we have what we call the lower part of our brain, and that hippocampus part of the brain, which is I call it our filing cabinet. So the filing cabinet holds all the memories, right? So everything is there, and it's already connected to our nervous systems. And so when we see children who are triggered, adults who are triggered, or the temper tantrums, it's in our nervous system. And so I think it's important that we not sugarcoat some of those things, but use the language that is appropriate for the kid. But just use, I mean, we don't go into the details.
Right.
But we do need to use the correct language, so that our children at 5 and 6 understand that I won't see Nana again, but look at this picture, or look at this baby doll.
Yeah.
One of the most precious things was that Zoe been able to show me is the doll that Nana gave her.
Yeah.
And her pictures with Nana's on it, right? Nana can always be close.
Right.
Right. Part of trauma and doing some of the EMDR work is we create for people who have experienced trauma. We always say, "What's your a calm space?" And that means when I'm going through a lot, that what is something that I have experienced that allows me to just calm down, right? And a lot of times I encourage children and adults to think of that person, your experience with that person. We have the ability through our 5 senses to bring up smells, to bring up a feeling, all of those things. And so through this process, we just teach them they're not here physically, but they're always here, which means I can think about them. I can write letters to them. I can do different things to still communicate.
I love it. I think through even beyond the funeral, there's so many different facets of death, but even beyond the funeral, then there's the gravesite, which after my mom's tombstone was delivered, I remember I wanted to go out there. I wanted to see it. I wanted to have my own reaction first before bringing Zoe and Ava, but I always knew that I wanted them to as well. When I was younger, going to a gravesite was just foreign to me. I don't know. I grew up in the days of Pet Cemetery. For some reason, I saw that movie, and when I saw that movie and saw people coming out of the grave, to me, the gravesite was just a scary place to be. I wanted my children to have a different experience, especially since the loss of my mom was their first major loss. I wanted them to go there. So the way that I framed it, I didn't call it a tombstone. We just called it Nana's Stone. And I said to them, would you like to come with me to see Nana's Stone? And they said, well, what is that? And I said, well, to me, it's like a meeting place. You know, Nana's up in heaven, but if she sees us coming over to her stone, she's going to peek out of that window so that she can see us. And you can have your talks with her. You can sit beside the stone if you want. You know, I'm kind of holding my breath, waiting for them to say, well, is she in there? You know, they didn't ask that. They didn't ask that, not yet. Again, 4 and 2 years old at this point. And I said, you know, would you like to, or at this point it might have been they were 5 and 3. Would you like to see the stone? And so we went out there and they asked me, can we decorate it? And I'm like, well, Lord, I know you're not supposed to go out there and put stuff. And I said, okay, let me think of something creative. So we got some marbles, and I let them put marbles around. And it was a September that we went. So that was Grandparents' Day. So they had made these little grandparent day arts and crafts. So they brought the arts and crafts, they put it around, and we're just out there. And then Zoe was like, can I take a picture beside Nana's stone? And I said, sure, you can. So I got pictures of them smiling, holding, hugging the stone. And I said, well, here we are. Here we are. So I think it takes some of that to say, you know, maybe things that we might not have thought were within us to create. Children are very expressive and creative. You know, the thing that I miss most about childhood is imagination. Like, I wish I could just be, you know, to me as an adult, imagination is just anxiety because when you imagine things, a lot of times we're imagining things go wrong, but for kids, they're imagining things go extraordinarily well. So to me, being able to express that in that way has been really important.
But that meant so much for her in the moment is she gets to see I can still do things that makes me proud, but also that would make Nana proud. Because she knew how proud Nana would be of her when she was crafty and when she was doing things. So she still gets to have those moments.
So let's get to the segment.
she's up there like an angel. She always wished to be an angel, and she is. So every time we miss her, we can just come out here and look at her. This is her. This is her smiling and praying. She always wished to have you and me. So this is what she created for us, a wonderful earth.
So that clip was actually Zoe and Ava, a little bit younger, 4 and 2. We were out somewhere, and Ava, the 2-year-old, was having a reaction, saw something, and started missing Nana. And so Zoe said to me, she said, "Mom, when we get home, can I teach Ava something?" And I was like, sure. I had no idea what she was going to do. I didn't even know that it was centering Nana. But when we get home, before we get in the house, Zoe grabs Ava's hand and goes over to our garden, which has a little angel in our garden. That angel was my mom's. So she goes over to the angel. She's holding Ava's hand, and she just starts talking about, when you start missing Nana, you could just come over here to this angel, and you can just touch on this angel, and this is Nana. Nana always wanted to have me and you. Nana always wanted to be an angel. You know, and I'm just sitting back, getting emotional, watching my baby teach my other baby about Nana being their angel now. And so in my mind, I'm like, man, it's actually working. The things that we had started surrounding them with, giving them this language, now the 4-year-old is teaching the 2-year-old. So it was just a really beautiful, pure moment. And in the background, you can actually hear some chimes. And those chimes were gifted to me in memory of Mom. So just hearing those chimes just go crazy at that moment, and you just hear those chimes, I just know that that was Mom saying that it's going to be okay. And I'm watching these 2 little girls remember me. And so, yeah, that's the clip. And to be fair, I did share that on social a while ago, so it still is a social media clip, but it felt very appropriate for our discussion today.
Yes, and I think it definitely is appropriate, but that is a healthy way,
Yeah.
right, of allowing children the space to build, we call it, to strengthen and build memories.
Yeah.
Right, in a healthy way. Nothing harmful about that. And definitely using those things that, you know, that we can connect to our loved ones is important.
Love it. So in what ways can families and communities increase awareness and advocacy for children who grieve?
Okay, so the way to increase it is to not shut it down.
Yeah.
To just be open, to have the conversations, be okay. So I encourage people, yes, you know, sometimes for us, our culture is we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We put things away. We take down pictures. We do a lot. So for me, with the grief process, whether I'm working with an adult or a child, I let them decide, like, do we want to run away from this, because we'll never get away from it. It's always going to creep back in. So do we want to sit in it? Let's sit in it. Let's feel it. Let's own it for what it is. It hurts. It could be anger. It could be frustration. It could be guilt. There could be so many different things, and it's okay. We just want to be able to give people permission to just feel what you feel. It is not wrong to feel what you feel. It is okay. And so I think being open, having the dialogue, talking about it. There are books, there are movies that you can watch with your children where there are moments where there's grief, but it's done in a way that children can recognize it. And I think that those resources are important, that when we're going through, that we use some of these tools and we sit and we watch and we go through that.
How can we move through the negative connotations associated with fear?
So I have a t-shirt that says, I seek God and I have a therapist.
I love it. Can I get one size large?
and what I will say, and I don't know if it's a post-COVID thing, but in our communities, we are seeing more churches aligning themselves with encouraging families to go and speak with someone that is a professional, that will have other resources. It is great to go to church. It is great to lean on your pastor and the congregation that's there to support you. But the difference is a safe space,
Yeah.
right? When you come into therapy, what is processed there stays there. So if you have to come in and divulge moments of feeling guilty because I didn't show up or I didn't do something, that's never going to be thrown in your face. Instead, we're going to validate that. Therapy allows you to just sit in your moment, and we sit with you. We hold space with you. And so I think helping just our community to realize that therapy is a safe space to come. If you had heart issues, you're going to the cardiologist.
Right.
Right. If you have a toothache, you're certainly going to go to the dentist. And so when we are emotionally not okay, or when we have thoughts that are not okay, therapy is no different. And that's how I describe myself as a therapist. I am no different than a specialist that you would go to get something fixed.
That's right. Oh, some gems, y'all. I hope you're catching the gems. Look, couple questions more, because we could talk all day.
I know.
And I'm so blessed that if I need to talk more about this, I can just call you, right?
Yes.
But we have to be limited in our remarks today. Maybe we'll have a round two. We might have to have a round two. I want to ask you, tell us more about how you use the art of play to reach children. And I want to hear about the wonderful things that you are working on now. If you can share some of that surrounding play.
So one of the things we do, like I said, I use sand trays. That is that skill of children have the ability to hide stuff. So in the play therapy world, everything, most of the toys that we use are similar to what they would have access to in the world, in the homes. But being able to allow children to, like I said, they hide stuff. And so through play, I just kind of observe, okay, what's happening here? What's happening here? And so there's two forms of play therapy. You have non-direct and you have direct. Non-direct, they lead. They are in charge of it, and I'm watching. And what I'm doing is I'm typically just trying to just build. And so building on what they have, we are focusing on really just encouraging them, right? We're rephrasing things to the point, well, oh, you did a great job, or strengthening and building self-esteem for kids. Oh, wow, that is really nice. Even when children ask me, well, how do you do something? I'll pause. And I'm like, oh, I bet you know how to figure that out. Because what we can teach children through play therapy is they have answers. They know how to do these things. And so many times parents, we like to just jump in and fix it.
Right.
And so sometimes we have to allow children to figure things out. And so they get to do that through play therapy. Another thing that we do is for children, especially with grief, is I love doing craft and the artworks with them, where we take clothing and different things that belong to a loved one, and we make doll babies, or we take that art, make something and make it art so that they have it all the time with them. We do journaling for the older kids, like, hey, what would this look like? Another one is writing a letter to that loved one. We've done messages in a bottle, messages in the balloons. And so there's so many different ways to give children the space to express their emotions and express what's happening with them. And the other piece to it is giving them permission to be able to continue to connect with their loved ones in whatever way is best for them.
I love it. Oh, Lucretia, you are just a wealth of knowledge. I wish I could bottle you up and keep you always. So we have to talk about just a second Inside Out, right?
Yes.
The movie, because we connected on that. The first one when it came out. Now the second one is out. But y'all, Lucretia used Inside Out 1 to help Zoe and Ava kind of frame language around their feelings. And so we played games, we did activities. And so now that 2 is out, we're getting ready to watch it together, all of us. I really feel like it's like a full circle moment. But one thing that I wanted to ask you about Inside Out in particular, Inside Out 1 and 2, it portrays different emotions, right? It portrays joy, anger. Now it's got envy. Now it's got anxiety, which I'm like, ooh. Ooh, if you haven't seen Inside Out 2, you need to see Inside Out 2, 1 and 2.
Yes.
But tell me, if grief was a character in Inside Out 2, what would grief look like? And what would be the energy of grief? Like if they did an Inside Out 3 and grief was a character, tell me about grief as a character in the movie.
Oh, wow. So I think if grief was a part of the character there, grief would be, so I think grief would just be like probably chaos, like all over everywhere.
Yeah.
Like a ping ball.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe rolling smooth. And then just hitting everything and knocking everything because of the anger that comes out, right?
Yeah.
So I think it would just be one of those emotions that for some people would be like, whew.
Right. Exhausted.
Just exhausted.
Yeah.
Right? I think is what it would look like because we never know what, right? And it's not until the child says, this is what I need, that we don't understand, like with the girls, why were they at the time when it's time to go to bed that they were in such a state, right? Part of that was because there was a routine. The Nana helping was there, that they could talk with Nana at the end of the night or they could do those things. And so I think sometimes it causes us to just kind of be like, oh, right? So yeah. And I think with grief, sometimes we don't know.
Yeah.
I can just be sad and I can't tell you why.
It could come out of nowhere.
And it just comes out of nowhere.
So that visual with like that ping pong, like and just like the marble smooth, and just like showing up. Because grief shows up in joy too.
Yes.
The most joyous of moments, I have gotten the strongest hint of grief in those moments. I'm like, oh my goodness. So that is so right. I agree.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we understand that sometimes we can sit in more than one emotion.
Yeah.
At a time.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I will say this, since you brought up Inside.
Yes.
This is a movie that I encourage both adults and children. This is not just a kid's movie.
Yeah, yeah.
I have so many adults who have gone to see this movie and they have come back and they were like, I get it now. I understand it now. Right? Because it is so hard sometimes to relate to those different emotions.
Yeah. So that'll be the grief practice that we challenge you all to try. If you haven't seen it, or even if you have, watch it together as a family. 1 and 2, or just 1, or just, however you want to play it. But watch it and unpack it in a different way. Look at it through a different lens that maybe you've looked at any other time. Yes. So I have the sugar jar here, which those of you may remember that the sugar jar is a practice that I got from my mom. She used to write out prayers and on little slips of paper and put it in her Bible. And sometimes she would just write a name. And I would always say, well, Mom, how do you know what to pray on? And she's like, I don't need to know. The Lord already does. So I have been collecting prayers, and there are 2 ways that you can get prayers to me. You can get prayers to me on my website, kelliandco.com, and that's KelliAndco.com. It'll be linked in the show notes. You can submit sugar jar submissions, or if you see me out and on location, if you come to Lit Java, it's here as well. You can write slips of paper, and what I do is I lift them in my own devotional time, and sometimes I will pick out things. What I did today was I let Zoe put her hand in the jar and pick out 2 things for today. So the first one is a prayer request, praying for Dolores Johnson White and the loss of her son to gun violence. And so when Zoe pulled this one out, and I said, okay, Lord, you just know, you just go where we need. But the fact that we're discussing children, we're discussing grief, this is something that happens, you know? And so I know it's not a mistake. So number one, my prayers, my thoughts are with the Johnson White family, in the loss of their son to gun violence. I can't even imagine what they are. I don't want to say I can't imagine, because I can imagine, and it's horrible. So my prayers are with you all for sure. I want to also, the second one that was pulled is a question, and it is, why does grief sadness appear when it's cloudy and the seasons change? I think that's such an eloquent question. I'm gonna kick that question to today's subject matter expert.
And why does grief sadness
appear when it's cloudy and the seasons change?
And so again, so this is one of those things where we can have our own perception of it, right?
Right.
This is one of those things where there is no right or wrong. It's how we are sitting in it. And so it's interesting. I was looking at a book about look up, and so similar to what you had shared with the girls about, you know, Nana's up looking out the window. And so sometimes I think when the seasons start to change, right, things are starting to die away. You know, the green trees are kind of going to the brown fall leaves, and all of that is that I think for me, it's one of those things that we understand that death itself is something that occurs. It is part of the life existence, right? And so we are going to go through these changes. And so seasons are like going through changes. And yes, and so when the clouds kind of hang over, or even when there's a rainy day, sometimes I think emotionally, a lot of people will have this kind of feeling or sense of just gloom, right?
Like seasonal depression.
Yes, seasonal depression, affective depression. So when the sun goes down, or when those seasons start to change from the spring and from the summer into the fall, there is something that occurs in the atmosphere that also, I think, does create a space of seasonal affective disorder, and that is less sunlight. So we don't have that sunlight. Sunlight is like a beam that pours into that energy. And so when those days are, when we have less sunlight, sometimes it is more challenging. I find that myself. It's more challenging.
It's harder to get out of the bed
and to be motivated. And when I can get a glimpse of the sunlight, I seem to have more energy, and I'm able to get up and move. So I think it's one of those things that it's just the person's perception of what they see. But a lot of times we do equate the seasonal changing, especially going into the fall seasons, as a moment of gloom.
Beautiful question. And I know that resonates with so many listeners because we all have the touch of that where the seasons are changing. And they certainly are changing now.
Yeah. And I will say this, one of the things too, because we do the holiday blues, right? Because I think too, as the season change into the fall, one of the things that starts happening is we start having more of what we call those family holidays, your Thanksgiving and your Christmas, right? And those are the times that we think about that loved one the most. Is, hey, Thanksgiving, they were supposed to be here. You know, Christmas, they were supposed to be here, and they're not there anymore. And so what I would encourage people to do during those times is don't shut them away. One of the things that we do for my grandparents, every year we have a bonfire in their backyard. Every year, every Friday after Christmas, no matter what, rain, sleep, so it doesn't matter. We're going to be out there. And so probably anywhere from 50 to 75 of their grandkids all come together. We have hot chocolates, different things, just to have this moment of just still being in awe of who they were as our grandparents. But we teach the younger ones. So even the newer ones who have never met them physically will know who their grandparents were. So we do that every year. But we also still, for myself, is I light a candle So even for the young lady who has lost a son, give yourself permission to do what you need to do to grieve.
That's right.
And to feel. But I light a candle in just in memory of they are still here.
Yeah.
And so that candle with that flame blend, just a burning, gives me a sense of I'm still connected.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. Oh, I get chills. Oh, this is so good. Lucretia, thank you so much. Yeah. I have some rapid fire questions, then I'll let you out of the hot seat. Look, don't look at that, because that's mine.
Okay,
that's my copy.
yours. Here you go.
Here we go. The object is to answer quick. Don't think too long.
Okay.
All right. Quick. The first one is fill in the blank. Quality counseling adds blank to childhood.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Quality counseling or therapy adds what to childhood?
Adds self-care.
Yes, I agree. What's the last show that you binged and loved?
Ooh, I'm not a binge watcher.
Okay.
Oh, but probably the last show that I have binged and loved was War Room.
Oh, okay. Good.
I watch that often.
Nice. That's a good one. Okay. What's your favorite thing about working with families?
The favorite thing about working with families is I get to meet extraordinary people. And every now and then I get to connect and they become part of my family.
I love it. Okay. Heels, flats, or sneakers?
Woo! Sneakers right now.
Look, I don't know if y'all can see the footwear, but the footwear is doing something amazing. She's got the Converses on, y'all, to match the pink pants. We might have to link to where you got all this fly gear in the show notes. And the earrings that you are wearing are actually from Lit Java.
Yes.
So look, it just got added to the wardrobe right before filming.
They worked so well. I had to put them on now.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, next question. I think I know the answer. Diamonds or pearls?
Pearls. Yes.
Okay, so I thought I was going to get you with that one. Look, Lucretia's a Delta. I'm an AKA. So I didn't know how that answer was going to be, but I knew we were going to get a good laugh. We are sister Greek. Okay. Yes. All right. A toddler is having a tantrum, and you have 30 seconds to calm them. What do you say or do?
I go and sit beside them or lay down with them, and we just breathe. We just breathe.
Just breathe. I love it. What is the biggest misconception about therapy?
That you're crazy.
So true.
And you're not.
And you're not. What's your idea of the perfect family date?
The perfect family date is probably just hanging out at a park, just walking around and just observing nature.
Last two questions is a two-part. First part, what has grief taken from you? Second part, what has grief given you?
Oh, wow. So what, okay, I'm getting teared up right now.
We have to.
So what grief has taken from me is I have had the pleasure of having some of like I said, the best grandparents ever, who have growing up on a farm at the beach, who have taught me so much about loving people and showing up. And more recently in April, grief took away from me probably my father-in-law, of knowing him for 30 years, and I don't know that I've ever met a man who loved me as if I was his own, to the degree that he did, and he believed in me, and just challenged me to. I went back and got my master's because he looked at me and said, "If you don't do it now, you'll never do it." And so he says, "What are you waiting on?" And so I went back, and I think he has probably been my biggest supporter in the practice and doing what I do.
I'm so sorry
so
for your
he's
loss.
up looking at me right now.
He is. I
am here in Texas because I could hear him says, "Well, go ahead, let's do it."
Well, thank you, father-in-law. Thank you. And what has grief given you?
It's given me the ability to be okay with the idea that I don't have to hide or cover up my emotions, that I'm human. It has allowed me to say it's okay for me to sit in my hard days.
Yeah.
And I don't have to hide. I used to hide from people. And so I think it's allowed me to say, let it go. Just be you. If you hurt, you hurt.
Thank you, my sister.
Yes.
This has been such an amazing conversation, y'all. I am so incredibly proud of you and the advocacy work that you do, the deep healing work that you do. I know there's a lot of long hours that nobody sees and nobody knows about, but you are doing it.
Yes.
Thank you for all that you do. Look, with the time that we have left, tell us, how can we contact you, get in touch with you? What projects are you working on that we can pray about? The time is yours.
Okay. So, of course, I'm in North Carolina. My goal is to be licensed in Texas. We're working on it to do virtual. And so right now I'm just focusing on just getting through and becoming completely registered as a play therapist, which is the thing. I love working with kiddos. And so, like I said, I'm in Knightdale, North Carolina, that Raleigh area. I am licensed in Florida, New Jersey, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, and of course, North Carolina. And so, my handle, I'm not the biggest social media person. So my business partner, she is the social media person. But of course, we could be, you can definitely find us on our website, Renewed Strength Counseling. And so, yeah, we'll make sure that Kelli has everything.
Yes. Fabulous.
I'm not a big social media person as far as knowing all the handles for Instagrams and stuff like that. I do get on social media to look and like and all that
Yes.
stuff.
We will make sure to link it all.
Yes, please.
Y'all, as always, take what you need, leave what you don't, share it with those who you feel need it the most. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us for another conversation live on location from Lit Java. This is Kelli Holloway and Lucretia Greaux.
Yes.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Mwah. And we're done.
Thank you for joining me, Kelli Holloway, inside of today's episode. For a deeper dive, remember you can watch this episode on YouTube and listen on your favorite audio streaming platform. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. For more information about Grief in the Raw podcast and to connect with me, my special guest, and the Grief in the Raw community forum, visit kellyandco.com. All links are in this episode's description. Tremendous thanks to the producer of Grief in the Raw, Miss Bethany Anderson, and major shout out to Jeffrey Smith, who curated the soundtrack for the pod.